Boulevard and Ventura Boulevard. We want to send it back to the Transportation Commission, but there is someone who filled out a card for this. You want to talk on that? We're sending it back. Okay, fine. Great. Do I have support? So moved. Okay, and that's been second. So item 3 will go back to the Board of Transportation Commissioners. So we have 1, 3, and 6. Okay, Clerk, would you please read item number 4?
Item number 4 is a Han Rosendahl-Reyes motion relative to LAPD reporting on recent bicycle incidents and conflicts between bicyclists and motorists.
Thank you. When I first got conscious of the issues of cyclists and automobiles, it was dramatically brought to my attention by a Mandeville Canyon incident in my district. The rest of that is history. Justice has been awarded in that case. But it signaled to me what are the rules of the road, what are the rights of cyclists. And frankly, I put a motion in so we could further go forward with the rights of cyclists. For instance, one thing I didn't know, that if you're riding your bicycle, you have just as much right to the road as the car. And the idea that you must be off to the extreme right and be doored or be knocked off is not the law. The law is a cyclist has rights too. There are a lot of laws within that Bicycle Bill of Rights that we need to continue to get to the public. We've got to change our culture of car culture to the notion that all kinds of modes of transportation, from pedestrian to cyclists to mass transit to buses, fit within the car concept as well. And we're all in this world together. Also, I learned rather abruptly in a meeting in the Valley of a cyclist incident where there was a Hummer involved with a bunch of cyclists. It was quite an extraordinary situation. And once again, there was questions raised about how do we deal with incidences or accidents or whatever the case may be when it comes to the rights of cyclists. Charlie Beck became our chief. In one of our initial discussions, I mentioned to him one of the issues that obviously I'm familiar and sensitive to our cyclists and their rights and how they should have those rights. He quickly moved on it. He will tell you a few things, including the commander that he's put into it and so on. And then after he makes his comments, I'll call the public comment cards. Chief, good to have you.
Councilman, thank you very much for having me. Thank you to the council and this committee, and also thank you to the public. You know, I want to talk about 3 basic things relative to our bicycling community in Los Angeles. And one is bicycle rights, the other is bicycle safety, and the other is bicycle security. And I think they're all on everybody's mind here. And then the other thing I want to touch on is the relationship of bicyclists as a significant piece of our community with the Los Angeles Police Department, and the necessity to raise the awareness of the entire police department to the ongoing and ever-increasing role of bicycles as a primary method of transportation in Los Angeles, combined with the fact that bicyclists, by the very nature of their mode of transportation, are our most vulnerable commuters. And so, because and that is the primary goal, and should always be the goal of the police department, is protect those that need protecting. And bicyclists definitely do. So bicyclist rights, and the councilman is exactly correct in saying that bicyclists have the rights to the road, as does everybody else. But I think it's even more important to recognize that because of their vulnerability, bicyclists need to be protected, and the Los Angeles Police Department intends to do that. And I know that there's been several high-profile incidents that have caused this community to question our intention there, and I want to make my commitment that those things will have not only been looked at, but will be righted and will be addressed, not only on an individual issue, but also on a department-wide issue, to make sure that the officers at work for Chief Pacer and I are aware of their duty to protect cyclists. I had a personal discussion with the city attorney today about the Magos incident, and he is committed to taking another look at that case. No promises, but another look. I want to bring this piece forward also. Your voices have been heard in this. This community has made the city, made the police department aware of your needs. That's why I'm sitting here. That's why the number 2 person in the police department, the individual in charge of the vast majority of our uniform resources, is sitting next to me. We hear you. We know we need to do a better job for you. We will do a better job for you. That's why I established a direct liaison, one of the highest ranking people in the police department to liaison directly with the bicyclist community. Commander Doan, who I hope that most of you have met, is somebody that not only understands the issues that you face, but has empathy for them, and will be your spokesperson to the police department. I ask for your indulgence and your patience in the culture change that Los Angeles is having to go through. And it's not only a culture change in the police department, it is a culture change in the way that LA commutes. And it's a good culture change. The bicyclists bring a tremendous amount to the table. They're not only eco-friendly, but they are, they take up much less space. It's a health-conscious piece. A lot of good, very good things, and should be respected for that. So I'm going to continue in my commitment to this sector of our community. I'm going to continue to have a direct liaison that works with you to make sure that our officers get trained, to make sure that your voices get heard, and to make sure that we make the changes that we need to do that are necessary to make not only maintain the rights of bicyclists, but to make them safe. One of the other pieces that got talked about a little bit in the press lately was security. In other words, bicycle thefts. And it is true that bicycle thefts are one of the few subsets of crime that have increased over the past year in the city. As a matter of fact, they increased about 8.9%. Still a small number, but significant, and something that we have to look at and that we have to take seriously, especially given the fact that they are now a primary means of commuting, and are also a high-ticket item for many of you. I mean, the bicycles can be extremely expensive, and obviously we treat all thefts seriously, but thefts of high-value items are of importance to us. So I say all these things in order to give you the hope that we are moving forward on this issue. Now, I don't ask you to take that at face value. I ask you to, as I always do, not only listen to what I say, but watch what I do. And that is evidenced by a couple of things. The fact that Chief Pacing and I are here to hear what you have to say. And, obviously, this is a big city, big police department, but what you're saying is important. So we're here to hear you. I've established a strong liaison with you. I'm going to continue that. And we're going to institute department-wide training to make sure that it's not just Chief Pacer and I to understand what you're saying, so it goes down to the rank and file. And that's, I think that's what you're looking for. I think that's what I'm looking for. I want to make sure that you understand that I hear your needs. And then I wanted to end with my thanks to the city attorney for taking another look at the Magos case. And I think that is people have to understand that there are significantly greater consequences to traffic accidents involving bicycles. Car versus bicycle, 4,000 pounds versus 200 pounds, not a very fair contest. And so we have to take those seriously, because your safety is my business. So I wanted to let you know that I take it seriously, and I'd love to hear the public comments and the things that we can do. Unfortunately, I'm going to stay for a while. Chief Pasinger will sit in my stead. I have to leave for another meeting, and that's nobody's fault, just the schedule and council and et cetera. But please don't take that as a lack of my interest. It is not. I would not be sitting here if that was true. And I certainly would not have somebody of the stature within the department as Earl Pasinger acting as my second. So thank you very much, and I thank Councilman Rosenthal for his commitment to this issue.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And let's line up for the questions. Stephen Box, Armanda Lipsy, did I get it right? Sorry. Arusha Samolsky. Again, I apologize. Just come on, line up, folks. Let's get going on it. Ted Rogers. Those are the first 5 I've just mentioned. And you get a minute if you can do it. If you need more time, take it. But we want the Chief to hear as many people's comments as possible. I had a whole series of questions for him myself, but I decided not to do it for the obvious reason I want you to be able to speak. Stephen Box.
Stephen, how are you?
How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm good.
I live in Hollywood, and I brought a couple of copies of the Cyclists Bill of Rights for you, and would love to get your endorsement on behalf of the LAPD. We would love to have you endorse the Cyclist Bill of Rights. And also, as you know, the Backbone Bikeway Network has been released, and that's a commitment to connecting destinations. And in the spirit of connectivity, I appreciate your connecting with us today. And we would like to use the Backbone Bikeway Network as an opportunity to put a focus, a law enforcement focus. You're already on the streets of LA. It'd be great if we could synchronize and connect your efforts with our desires to get to destinations just like everybody else. And so, in that sense, it's not asking for more. It's just asking for us to communicate with you and with us so that we can do our best to make the streets safer for everybody. So thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Stephen.
For the next person, the question that might help Stevie on this one is, I also understand that a working group has been formed by LAPD with some of the cycling advocacy groups. Has this group held any meetings yet?
2 that I know of. And Stevens, you know, I wanted to, before Steven sits down, I want to thank him for his leadership on this issue. He and others have been instrumental in bringing the issues to me personally and through me to the rest of the department.
Thank you. Amanda?
Yes. I just want to thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking the time out. But there's one thing that struck me as you spoke. You used the word traffic accident versus traffic incident. And I think to categorize these incidents as accidents is unfair to the cyclist, especially when a lot of times the statistics have shown that it is the fault of the driver, not the cyclist, that causes the incident and also the injury to the cyclist. I can't afford to be hurt. I'm a dancer. I need my legs. I need my body. I like to ride my bike. And I would like to know that you're going to follow up with anything that may happen to me, any incident that may occur on the streets that may cause me bodily harm and therefore my mode of earning money. And I'm a ballet dancer, by the way. So I want to know that I can still have a livelihood if should I be hurt, that someone will be prosecuted. So that's all.
Thank you for your comment. Sir?
Hi, my name is Dennis Heinman, and I'd like to talk about the intersections. I travel all the way across the valley, and part of that is going next to the Orange Line. But however, some of the intersections are designed that you cannot go through them legally on a bicycle with your safety in mind. However, the city, and I guess in conjunction with the county, has made the Orange Line pathway crosswalks some of the best in the world you could possibly design for safety. And the reason for that is mainly because it's so close to the bus. Now, to me, this should be continued, replicated throughout the city, whether it's for the freeway on-ramps or the intersections that are really busy. And there's different degrees you can do this. Essentially, you have to stop the cars when let's just say it's manually activated for the pedestrian or cyclist to go across the street, to replicate that, to stop the cars. Red lights, turn signals of red that you can't go when it's been activated, and that's a free space that cannot be invaded.
Thank you.
All right.
Your comment.
Hi, my name is Arisha Smolarski. I'm with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition, and we have spoken in the past as well, and LACBC has been working with the Bicycle Task Force, and I appreciate definitely your efforts in listening to us and collaborating with us. As you know, there is a rising number of cyclists on the road. With that, there is a rising number of incidents involving cyclists, such as hit and runs. And one of the things that have come up at the Bicycle Task Force is that there is an internal document that is going to be circulated within LAPD so that all LAPD officers are on the same page as how to fairly report these collisions. When is that going to happen, and how is that going to be enforced? That's one of the questions I'd like to have an answer on.
You know, that document has been prepared. I think it's waiting for Chief Pacinger's signature, and it'll go to the 6,000 or more police officers that work directly for him. You know, it becomes part of our procedures manuals, and that's the standard that we hold our employees to.
Okay. One thing I would like to ask, though, is whether or not the cycling task force that you're working with can have a chance to look at it before it gets circulated to make sure there are no gaps in missing information.
Sure.
Okay, great.
And I'll talk to, you know, unfortunately, Commander Doan is not here today. He's traveling. He's on his way back to the city. So this will be one of the things that we bring to him.
Okay. Another question I have is, how are you working to better enforce hit-and-run collisions involving cyclists?
Well, you know, this document that you talk about, this training piece, is one of the ways that we're doing that, because I know that as the statements I made would indicate, you know, this is much more serious than just dented tin, obviously, and so, you know, that's one of the pieces, and then the other is an educational piece, and that is. That's a big endeavor for a large organization, but we started with our traffic divisions, who are most likely to be involved, you know, to be the people that investigate accidents or incidents, and you know, those are the people that most benefit from the education.
Okay. And also, as far as bike thefts, what specifically are you doing to address that issue? I know you sort of talked about it a little bit, but I think that the bicycle community would like to know how you are actively trying to address this growing problem as well.
Well, we have, you know, there's every location that suffers bicycle thefts is unique in that all crime prevention is based on a couple of things. It's based on deterrent of people who are likely to do crime, deterrent of locations that are conducive to crime, you know, and then also the modifying of those locations so that they are less conducive to crime. One of the highest bicycle theft location in the city is the USC campus, in and around USC. And working with USC police, they have their own police force. We have restructured the way that bicycles are parked there and increased the rules about how students park their bicycles. And amazingly as that may sound, you know, just the fact that students aren't allowed to leave their bicycles laying on the sidewalk or laying in the courtyard has decreased bicycle thefts immensely there. So part of it is an educational piece, you know, educating the public, you know, lock it or lose it, that, you know, all that kind of normal pieces. The other is to take these crimes seriously. There's an incident that occurred just last week where a high-end bike or medium-end bike, $3,000 bike was taken. You know, it was discovered on Craigslist. We set up a sting. There's a receiving case done. You know, very, very important to do thorough investigations, because what you want to do to reduce crime is you want to increase the likelihood of capture. And so, you know, and I'm not just talking bicycle crime, I'm talking all crime. Increase the likelihood of capture and then harden the target. And so those are the basic strategies.
Okay. And then one other thing I'd like to know is whether or not we know that there is a hit-and-run law, but it's not being enforced generally, even for motor vehicles. I think and can we have your support in working with the district attorney's office and the city attorney's office if they start taking this hit-and-run law, if it, you know, a law is a law, to actually start really acting upon it and not, you know, saying, well, it's not that important, people aren't getting injured, because people are really getting injured at this point. So I think it'd be really helpful to get LAPD more involved in ensuring that the CMDA's office start prosecuting hit and runs seriously.
And as I said, I had a conversation in person, face-to-face with our city attorney, Carmen Tutranich, about this exact issue today.
Yeah, but it's not just for the Ed Mangos case, which is great,
no, but
for all cases.
It is you know, you have to start with these things. All of these things require examples. People, you know, laws are changed based on specific incidents. You know, filing policies are changed when attention gets drawn by specific incidents. You know, it's easy to talk, you know, I'm just giving you advice here, and you guys can use it or not, but you know, it's easy to talk in broad generalities, but nobody hears you. When you bring real faces to these things and real circumstances to it, then people take notice. And that's, you know, this is a good start.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, too, for that interaction there, which I appreciate. Ted Rogers, come on up. William Campbell, come on up. Kathleen Ruse, come on up. And is it Colin Bogart?
Hi, I'm Ted Rogers. I write the bikinginla.com blog. Chief, I appreciate you being here. For most of my 20 years in Los Angeles, I thought I could count on the LAPD anytime, except when I was on two wheels. And then I couldn't depend on you at all. What I want to talk to you about today is traffic accident investigations. We need to improve training of your officers to investigate bicycle accidents, because bicycles operate differently from cars. The physics are different. The way we handle them are different. The circumstances are different. It takes a trained officer, which in all honesty really doesn't exist in most cities of the country, to be able to read those signs. I'd like to give you a couple of articles from the International Police Mountain Bike Association that addresses this matter. Thank you. But it's, I was involved in a road rage incident a few years back. May I continue for just a moment? And the police officer who investigated it was unable to read the signs of the accident. He didn't understand that a bicycle could not fall to the left when making a right-hand turn. He didn't know how to read the signs that show where I landed on the street. He didn't know how to read the signs on my bicycle that indicated that I was in fact hit by a car. Because of that, a driver who committed an assault with a deadly weapon got away scot-free. And I walked away with no recourse because of a bad police report.
And I will certainly look at the training information you gave us. One of the things that Chief Paysinger has done is that he's moved the investigations of all accidents or incidents involving bicycles to our traffic divisions. One of the things that happens, and this is inside baseball, and I apologize for going into such detail, but we have so many cars that are specifically assigned to traffic investigation, but they don't cover all traffic accidents or incidents. The normal patrol ends up handling a lot of them because we just don't have enough people assigned to traffic. But we're making it a requirement that our trained AI collision investigators, who are the most likely to have the information that you're talking about, and will, through your information and other sources, handle these incidents, because it is important. The risk of injury is so much greater.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We have 8 more people. I'd like to get them all in before the chief leaves, if possible. Okay? Sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Will Campbell. I'm a much better cyclist than I am a speaker. As a matter of fact, I'm less intimidated on the streets than I am in front of you here today, but I felt it important to take the day off work and bike here. It's heartening to hear that you discussed with the district attorney about the Ed Magos case. But I was outraged to hear how it developed, how, according to my understanding, the suspect turned herself in and was released without much consideration. And then to follow up and hear that the district attorney has just basically absolved her of any culpability is an outrage as a cyclist, as a citizen. And I'm on the streets. I've logged more than 16,000 miles as a dedicated commuter cyclist in the last 3 years. I'm out there. I see the good and the bad. I have a lot of faith in the LAPD, but it has been damaged. And like I said, it's heartening to hear that you're here. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you letting us know that you discussed this with the district attorney. But I am not going to take it at face value. I'm going to be watching, like you said, and I'm hoping to see positive stuff come out of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Kathleen? And then we have Colin behind and Ramon. Come on up, Ramon and Don. Come on up. Daniel. I try to get them all in if we can. Patrick, and then Hamid.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Roos. I actually live in Echo Park, and I've been a commute cyclist / fun cyclist for years. So I've been there and everywhere. But I'm glad that you're committed to trying to help us out, because I feel over the years I've been through so many road rages, and every time we report it, I get laughed at by the LAPD like it's no big deal. I'm sorry, but somebody taking a beer bottle going 30 miles an hour at a car at you is a big deal. So I'm glad that you're more committed to helping us out. But what I have noticed, though, is that a lot of times I notice that that when I'm on group bike rides, we're just riding our bikes around, and sometimes I notice that the LAPD actually harass us rather than trying to support us. So I don't know if in your education program or training your officers to be more pro-cyclists, if they can also incorporate that we're just out trying to have a good time and focus more on people prosecuting people who are harassing us and physically hurting us with their cars and throwing things at us, rather than necessarily harassing us for just being in a big group and socializing. That's it. Thank you.
On that note, when you see a specific incident like that going forward, get the name, if you can, of the officer or the ID number or something like that, and we'll make sure the chief gets it.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that Colin?
Yes. My name is Colin Bogart, and personally I'd like to echo what Will had to say. I'm glad to hear that you're taking another look at the Ed Magos case. Ed Magos is a friend of mine, and he was not able to be here today, so he asked me if I could read a statement for him, a brief statement. This is what Ed wrote. I was doing something I loved, something that was good for me, good for my community, and good for the environment. All that was taken away on January 6th when my world was turned upside down by a woman who slammed a car into me while I was cycling to work. She left me exposed and injured, laying in the street while she fled the scene. After much discussion with the LAPD, the incident was correctly assessed as a felony hit and run with injury. Much to my dismay, I have discovered that neither the district attorney nor the city attorney intend to prosecute this case and serve justice. To add insult to injury, I recently read in the LA Times that the city attorney is going to prosecute actor Sean Penn for kicking a photographer. Somehow there is time and resources to deal with a kicking case, but when I was smashed by a car and left for dead, the incident is not worth pursuing. I just have a little more, if I may.
Sure.
The system seems to have broken down and failed at multiple levels. The driver who hit me committed a crime by fleeing the scene and was driving without insurance, is out on the road with nary a consequence. My wife, children, and I are the ones suffering the consequences and are left to pick up the pieces of this mess. Hit and runs must be prosecuted as the crimes that they are, and a strong message must be sent that they will not be tolerated in this city.
Thank you very much for that statement, too, and thank him for making it for us. Ramon.
That was great. That was really touching testimony. Thank you, Colin. I just wanted to double line, under the fact that this is a public safety issue for cyclists. That once again we can walk our streets at night here in downtown in Echo Park where I live, we can't ride during the day. It's still an issue for us. I mean, if you look into this crowd, if you look into this face, I mean, you have people who are subject to these things every single day. I don't go one day without hearing about someone who's been hit by a car, someone who's been harassed on the street, someone who's been left for dead on the street. So continue to work continue to work with the DA's office, with the CA's office, continue to work with your officers. And if we can hear that the LAPD takes a stand to support bicycling in this city, that'd be great. From the chief.
I think you already did.
Well, one more time.
Well, of course I do. Of course I do. It is not only a valid, but it is an admirable form of transportation, and of course I support it.
Excellent. That's so great to hear. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Ramon.
Hi, my name is Don. I'm actually also a victim of a hit and run, much like the Ed Magos case where I didn't suffer any broken bones. And what I've learned from my case, is that there's the issue of that the city attorney and the district attorney do have a hard time prosecuting these cases because in my case I didn't get a facial ID of the driver. Now the thing is that the fact that they're not going to prosecute these type of cases, or they're reluctant to prosecute these kind of cases, it sends a strong message to drivers that says, go for it, take off. There's not a high chance that you're going to get prosecuted. Now what I want to ask the city attorney and the district attorney is to stop being soft on these crimes, because it's not about the conviction. To send a message, we need to have prosecution. We need to basically have these cases prosecuted, because in my case, the person is being prosecuted, and just the threat of being prosecuted is the message that we need to send out there, that you're going to have to deal with getting a lawyer, you're going to have to deal with going to court over this. maybe you won't get convicted, but maybe you will. And that kind of threat is what we need out there, and we need that kind of message. We need the city attorney and the district attorney to actually forget about padding their stats and just go ahead and prosecute these cases.
Thank you very much for that. And, for the record, too, I spoke with the city attorney yesterday, as did the chief speak with him today, and he is reconsidering it, and we're going to stay on that until we get a better answer on that particular situation there. Daniel.
My name's Daniel. I rode my bike from Atwater Village. I'm an attorney. I took a day off today from my private practice to be here. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Chief, I applaud you in your efforts and the Transportation Committee in speaking with the city attorney to reconsider the Ed Magos case. My only hope is that it doesn't fall on deaf ears, that the city attorney is just as committed as the Transportation Committee and as the chief and as LAPD in prosecuting these cases. As an attorney, I understand that there is prosecutorial discretion in certain cases. As a realist, I understand that there are limited resources within the city, within the prosecuting agencies, at the CA and the DA level. Nonetheless, what we need from every level is a commitment, also from the CA and the DA, to take these cases seriously. There are people getting hurt out there. It's happening. And unfortunately, a lot of them are slipping through the cracks. We're paying attention to everything that's going on at this point. Just a quick point. We've had successful convictions now on Dr. Thompson and Mr. Hidalgo. Both have been sent to Wasco State Prison, and we applaud the DA's efforts in those cases. Hopefully we have more successful cases like those.
Thank you for that, Patrick, and then Hamid.
Hey, thanks a lot for hearing us today. I just want to impress upon you guys how difficult it is to find a hit-and-run driver. It's the burden of a cyclist who gets hit to get the license plate of the vehicle, and they're supposed to have seen the face of the person that hit them, sometimes from behind. So it's very, very difficult for us to even get one of these, to find the culprit in this instance. And then when it happens, most often these people are not prosecuted unless somebody dies. Jen Diamond, a couple of years ago, was hit and hospitalized for, I think, a couple of months. They found the guy. They never pressed charges. The man, the Swedish rapper who hit a pedestrian in Hollywood, ran over him and killed him and left him for dead, hit him on purpose. He got 10 years. A woman in Long Beach killed a driver of a scooter named David Golds and put his friend in the hospital for several months. She got 1 year. She ran a red light. She didn't have a license. And I just want to make one more point, is that when people leave the scene of a crime, of a hit and run, there's usually a reason for it. They're usually drunk, or they don't have a license. There's some other law that they're trying to get away from breaking. And I think that it's the magnitude of DUI laws that have increased so much to help keep our roads safe that prevent people from stopping, because they get in more trouble for a DUI than they would for a hit and run.
Thank you for that. And before Hamad speaks, I want to give the Chief, for the record, 2 quick questions here. It's about officer education, Chief. I understand that you're now incorporating some of these lessons into roll call training. Is that true? And if so, what are the specific areas you're covering in this roll call training?
I'll let Chief Basinger talk about that since he runs all that.
Very good.
Thank you, Councilmember. And before I answer your question, I'd also like to mention the fact that in terms of advocacy, when I was a chief in South Bureau, as a matter of fact, I immediately preceded Chief Beck in South Bureau. I was successful in securing a grant to the tune of $250,000 for the specific and sole purpose of placing LAPD officers on bicycles. Before my knees went bad, I was a rather avid bicyclist myself. But both of us stand very, very committed to ensuring that the rights, the health, the safety, and the rite of passage for bicyclists in this city does not go unnoticed. Not only do we have a operations order that I intend to author myself, but also a series of e-learning processes on the computer that covers the whole gamut, not only bicyclist rights, but some of the investigative aspects, too, of when they get to the scene in terms of how they handle bike investigations prior to the arrival of the experts from our traffic division. So I think once we cover both the written document, the e-learning, and the constant review of all manner of bike rights and investigations, I believe we'll be in a much better place, as the Chief has mentioned.
Thank you for that, Earl, Chief. And we'll ask him more questions after the main chief leaves. We're joined now by Richard Alicon and also Mr. Parks. Hamid.
Good afternoon. Hamid Khan with the LA Taxi Workers Alliance, which represents over 1,400 taxi workers in the city of Los Angeles. The Taxi Workers Alliance strongly supports a sustainable bike plan as a key part of the overall 21st century green transportation system of the city of Los Angeles. We seek and we hope that this infrastructure incorporates walking paths, buses, bikes, and taxis as a key part of the system. And thank you for taking the initiative, because just as we demand safety and freedom from violence for taxi workers, we do demand fair treatment for bikers and also their safety as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chief, do you have any final comments you'd like to make?
And the only thing I would like to say is I want to thank this community. You know, your solidarity and your good intentions here will make LA a better place. And I commit to the police department. We work with you. You know, we're not a perfect organization, but we are one that tries to be. So, you know, work with us and we will work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Let's give him a round of applause. I can tell you, since he's been chief, I've seen more action on this issue than has ever been done before, and his commitment is genuine and real. I think the appointment of Dorn as the commander, who's on the 10th floor with direct access to him, is another example of how committed he is. And I think you're going to see a more radical appreciation of cyclists and their issues than you've ever seen before with his leadership. Again, thank you, Chief, for being here. Now, let me go and ask a few questions of the Deputy Chief here. What's your title? Is that Deputy or number one?
Assistant Chief.
Assistant Chief, okay. Because the Deputy is the 2-star, and the 3-star is that title. Okay. You answered my first question here. Who is advising you on, and where do you go to obtain your information to educate officers as part of this roll call training?
Well, one of the things, as Chief Beck mentioned earlier, I think it's important to obtain as much information as we can from the Bicycle Working Group that Commander David Doan is now an integral part. Before we lay down any rules, regulations, procedures, policies, or protocols, I think it's foolish, again, as Chief Beck mentioned, I think it's foolish to move forward in identifying any training modules or even a direction for the police department without listening first to the user group. And I think that's the first step, and we have made, I believe, just based upon the briefings that I've received from Commander Doan and his relationship with the working group and all the various interests within those groups, I think we have made significant progress.
When you take the significant progress to the next level, somebody had mentioned me earlier, the boots, and what was the other thing, Stephen? Boots and what?
He doesn't remember. Thank you.
Okay. He was saying to me, and this is where the real story is, the boots, which are expression he used as the folks on the street who are the officers that see situation, versus the boots on the ground versus, I guess, the 3 stars in the thing. The question really becomes, do we create a training module in the academy, and then do we have refresher courses for officers on a regular basis that gives them a better appreciation of the rights of cyclists and what their role is dealing with a cyclist?
The first question, as it relates to the academy, I'll have to defer until I have an opportunity to talk to Assistant Chief Sandy Jo MacArthur, who's in charge of training. It could very well be that is an area that they already cover, but I'm not certain. I don't want to speak out of turn. In terms of the refresher training, that's one of the principal advantages of the e-learning that we normally have in terms of it being computer-based, because as it is with some of the other very important training elements of the police officer service, let me give you an example, like pursuit training. It's something that we have to revisit and we should revisit on a very regular basis. The e-learning or the computer-based training gives us an opportunity to do that by virtue of the fact that it's always right there available to us, right in front of the officer at his or her computer workstation.
Very good. And here's a general question. I understand that you're working on self-reporting system in consultation with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition that would allow cyclists to self-report incidents with motorists. Quote, 1, how do you intend to use this information you gain from the system? And second, is this a system that will be monitored by LAPD, or will you rely on problem spots being brought to your attention by your partners in the cycling community?
The latter, yes, and also as we normally track crime, as you probably know, we look at crime every day throughout the city. And because we gather so much information by crime reports, self-reporting, and all matter of community contacts, we're able to see the ebb and flow of crime, and in this case, bicycle incidents, almost on a regular basis. And so we'll use that as a lever and as a means to make sure that we stay abreast of all of these incidents as they occur. And I'd also like to go back and emphasize a point that the chief made earlier in terms of moving or migrating the investigation of bicycle incidents or collision incidents specifically to our traffic divisions to ensure that they get looked at, they are evaluated and investigated by individuals who have expertise. That's all they do in terms of the investigation of traffic incidents, traffic collisions, and in this case, bike collisions. And so I think because we've emphasized and giving them that opportunity and responsibility, we'll have a better overall evaluation of bike incidents as we move forward.
Okay, and I know my colleagues want to ask some questions. Last one I have right now are officers on bicycles. We have officers on bicycles. How many do we basically have, and what role do they play, or could they play, in this whole issue that we're discussing here?
It's interesting you should mention that because when I was the chief in charge of South Bureau, at that time citywide we had less than 100 officers who were trained to ride bikes. And I was a passionate, and still am, advocate of ensuring that we have officers that do their patrol on bike, because quite frankly there's so many positive dimensions of having that type of enforcement and prevention kind of activity. First of all, the young cops love it. There's something about being caught in the sarcophagus of a police car that generally doesn't make for a good day. They get a wonderful opportunity to exercise, quite frankly, on duty. But the thing that I enjoy about it is because it gives them an opportunity to interact with the public in a way that really speaks to humanity.
Right.
And we have seen just an enormous networking opportunity between the police department and the biking community, the public in general, but particularly the officers who are riding those bikes. Today we have over 500 officers that are trained right now for bikes. I would also add that even some of our specialized units in Metropolitan Division, the crime suppression detail that we send specifically to hotspots for crime, even they are trained for bikes. And so in terms of us having advanced within the organization, the whole philosophy, the psychology of taking advantage of this premier transportation method, I challenge any law enforcement institution in America to mimic what we have done here with the LAPD.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions, comments? Mr. Kretz.
Well, first, a story, which I would have added to some of the others, particularly if Chief Beck was still here. But it's an example of the kind of approach that I think historically the DA and others have taken to hit and runs. There's a case I witnessed, and it's a little old. This was under the previous DA. I actually saw a hit and run from across the street as a pedestrian. A fellow was parked in the red, ran to his ATM to make a quick withdrawal. A ticket writer came along, didn't have license plates, stood by the driver's side door and wrote down the VIN number. As he was writing it down, the fellow hopped into the car, drove off, running the guy over on both legs and breaking both his legs. Now, in this incident, I said, okay, everybody, let's sit and wait for the guy, because he had left his ATM card and his receipt in the machine. And sure enough, about 45 minutes later, there he came. Well, I tried to make sure as a witness that this guy got prosecuted. I followed it up. Ultimately, they decided, well, he came back, so he wasn't a hit and run, which I think only is illustrative of how unseriously folks have historically taken it. I hope we can do what we can to make that change, not only for cyclists, but for pedestrians, and I suspect to a lesser degree it's not taken seriously even for vehicle-on-vehicle. But that leads to the question I have, which is, what do you think the percentage difference is in terms of how seriously we take a vehicle-on-vehicle hit and run as opposed to a pedestrian or a bicyclist? What do you think the percentages are of follow-up and prosecution? And what can we do to get the cyclist and pedestrian incidents taken more seriously and prosecuted more consistently?
I couldn't even hazard a guess at the percentage. But I will say this, and again to echo the point that was made by Chief Beck, the fact that he and I are here today, I believe is a very bold exclamation point on the seriousness with which he takes it and the charge that he has given me in terms of taking any incident involved with a bicyclist. Frankly, it's offensive to suggest to me that we should take it any less serious. It doesn't make any sense today, and it's not going to make any sense tomorrow. If we have somebody that is placed at risk and they are victimized by another motorist or anybody else, to the extent that we can, based upon the information, we will take it as seriously as we do a motorist on motorist in a vehicle incident. I couldn't begin to tell you how offensive it is for somebody to suggest to me that there's a difference because somebody happens to be on a bicycle and the other person in a car.
Well, I would certainly agree with you, but and people may say that, may think that in theory, but in practice, my sense is both bicyclists and pedestrian hit and runs don't get taken as seriously. So whatever we can to change that.
I guess what I'm talking about, the Chief talked about the change in the philosophy as we move forward. I really can't speak to what we've done in the past. I can only give you a strong commitment of where we're going in the future.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, let me just take that to the notes that I have on this, Chief. And Matt, you can come on up in this discussion. I know you wanted to be here before, but just stand here for a second.
Sir, I'm sorry I'm late. I know
okay, just hold up for a second. Okay. The LAPD recently released the 2008 data on bicycle collisions that revealed almost 1/4 of the traffic collisions were hit-and-run incidents. Moreover, given the refusal by our DA, and I know our city attorney is reconsidering this present case, to prosecute these cases, there appears to be a severe miscarriage of justice here. The public perception here is that there is something very wrong with the system, and I think the public deserves some answers as to why these hit-and-run incidences continue to not be picked up. Now, obviously, this gets to a very complication because of the different layers of government involved. But maybe you can address the LAPD's role, beginning with the report of an incident, comes to either from the scene or from the station when a cyclist comes in to report an incident. What do we do now, and what do you think we need to do going forward?
I think where we are now in terms of a higher recognition and where we intend to take these investigations really has as its foundation what we've talked about here today in terms of creating a new and a stronger recognition and support of the biking community, of the cycling community. The second thing is I think it has everything to do also with our ability to receive and leverage better information in terms of at the onset of the investigation, what we didn't have before, what we do have now available to us by virtue of technology, our cameras, and other means to create identification opportunities of people who are involved in, criminals who are involved in these kinds of incidents. So we take the greater recognition, leverage it against the better technology, a better investigation from the onset, because anybody in the law enforcement community knows that the more and the better you investigate those criminal acts, from the beginning, the greater the likelihood that you're going to have a positive outcome in terms of prosecution later.
Thank you.
And so as we move forward, I'm fairly confident that we'll move forward in a much better and more efficient way.
Yeah, I know Mr. Alcon will speak with Matt real quickly. Go for it.
I'm sorry, sir. I just wanted to get the officer's name. You all have name tags, but
Paysinger.
Pazer, sir.
Chief Paysinger.
Yeah. Pazer, I understand your comments, and I believe you when you say that you want to help cyclists. But the truth is that the LAPD has a terrible record of handling cyclist incidents, including one in which I was involved, in which I have correspondence from the LAPD in which an officer was reprimanded. However, in the incident in which I was involved, 3 bikes were run over by a large SUV, I think it was a Hummer. Pretty sure it was a Hummer. And the driver was obviously drunk. The driver was obviously aggressive and attacking cyclists with his car. And the police let him go. And the officer in charge, Officer Cho, you may not know him, there's a lot of Chos. I spoke to a police detective and he said, yeah, we got a lot of Chos, we don't know which one it is. But it's true. He said to me, you know, if I was in my car with my family and a bunch of cyclists were angry at me for hitting them and I felt in danger, I would have done the same thing. I would have ran you guys over and I would have run away, and I carry a gun, which was his last statement. And this type of speech from police officers is pretty indicative of the culture that is the LAPD, which is that you guys shouldn't be on the street, you guys don't deserve a place here, you're endangering yourselves, and you should go home. The other day I got a ticket from a police officer for riding too slow in the bike lane. And he said, this is a warning that you shouldn't ride in Culver City. And this is the type of culture that you guys breed, and you speak very well, and I respect you, but it's all wrong. None of what you said is true. None of the people on the LAPD act in the way that you are saying they should act, which I agree with. It's just not true. And you guys need to act. If someone doesn't act, people are dying. People on the streets are getting killed. And the drivers are being let go. And when they come back 2 days later to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to be on Twitter and in the news, I'll come back now, they should go to jail. They should go to jail.
Let me ask you this. The last incident that you experienced with an officer, did you get the name or the ID or anything?
Oh, it's Officer Cho. I know him. Believe me, this has been talked to with the police commission and also with the Inspector General's office. There's reports on it. There's files on it. You can read all of it. They took my statements. I went to the police department. They recorded my statements. You can read all of it if you want. In fact, I said this to you also, Mr. Rosendahl, a few months ago in City Council chambers. Maybe you don't remember.
Yeah, but the question is, what follow-up? Let's get to the facts here. Chief, what do you know about this, and where are we going with what he's saying?
We can talk offline in terms of the investigation in terms of investigation of your complaint after this meeting. Unless you want to talk about it now. We can talk about it now.
Let's do.
If you would give me more information in terms of the name of the officer.
What information would you like?
In terms of the name of the officer, the date, and the time.
It's Officer Cho. It's in the Central Division.
May I please?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. I will take it upon myself personally to find out the disposition of your case.
I've already got the letter. They already said, you're wrong, it didn't happen. I don't need you to go in.
Give him a copy of the letter.
Why is that helpful?
Matt,
I understand, but I don't believe that anything will be done about my case. What I'm complaining about is your lack of action. Something needs to be done. Someone needs to make a statement. The city council needs to make a statement that the DA will prosecute hit-and-run drivers that hit cyclists. It will happen, and it needs to actually happen.
Okay, I'd like your letter. We're going to give it to him.
Taped on my wall.
But give us a copy of it so that he can follow up, and he will get back to you. We will make that happen. Thank you very much. Okay, those are the items. Now, please, Mr. Alicon.
I have a very specific question question. I also, I didn't witness the accident, but I found a man who had been hit by a car laying on the side of Laurel Canyon in Sun Valley. And, we called for the ambulance, and the police responded, and he was taken away. But I was very curious because his bike was left there, and I didn't know whether the police were going to take it, or so. If somebody has their property laying by the side of the road, I'm just wondering how it's handled. I wasn't sure there was a policy on handling. In my district, when people are riding bikes, it's not for recreation. It's typically for work. And so I was thinking, not only does the guy get taken away in an ambulance, and I'm sure he was going to lose a significant amount of time on the job, but now he's lost his means of transportation to work. And so I was wondering, is there a policy on how to take care of the bike when the rider is injured to the extent that they can't handle the bike themselves?
Normally during the investigation, what the police department attempts to do is to identify a person to whom we can release the bike either at the scene or shortly after the collision incident. If that's not the case, immediately thereafter during the investigation, to the extent that we can find somebody that will take custody of the bike, we will do that. Short of that, we'll maintain it in custody at the local police station who is handling the investigation, and as soon as we identify either the owner, if he or she returns to take custody of the bike, or somebody that the owner designates to take custody of the bike, we will release it until their custody and care.
Okay, well, in this case, the rider was unconscious, and and there was nobody there who knew him, and the officers, I don't think they took the bike. I mean, they when I asked them were they going to take the bike, they looked at each other like, what are we going to do with it? And I think they did take the bike after I asked, but I'm a city councilman, and they knew that, and so I'm just concerned that it might have been handled differently. I didn't take down the names of the officers or anything, but I just wanted to make note that it's a process. There are some things that when you join the police force, you join to do a lot of things, and one of the things you're probably not thinking you're going to be doing is carting somebody else's bike around. So it's not necessarily first on their list, but under the concept of service, what's the best way to do a complete service? I just wanted to mention that. Redundancy is the best form of education, and I just hope that when as the training program is reviewed and then implemented, I would only hope that it's brought to their attention that this may be a very part of this person's life, and not just, I mean, it could be part of somebody's life as recreational, it's very significant, but when it's something they use to get to work, it really could upset their balance of life completely.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on, please. This has been a discussion, and I didn't want it terribly formal, and it hasn't been, which is exactly what we need to get a real discussion out. Again, your name for the record.
My name is Don. Just a little bit more on the hit and run. I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying, Councilman. One of the things that I realized on my case was that the police were making their own determination of who to send the case to, whether they should send it to the DA or the CA, in which case the DA prosecutes felonies, the CA prosecutes misdemeanors. Is there anything we can do? Okay, because here's the thing, that's kind of like allowing the DA to pass the buck. It enables the DA to not even see the case and refuse it, whereas the police are making the judgment ahead of time about whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony. And is there any way we can compel or work out some kind of arrangement where the police are not making that decision, where they send it to the DA, and then the DA records a statistic that says, I'm not going to look at this case, because right now this case didn't make it to the DA. There's nobody that's being held accountable for that, for deciding that it's not a felony.
That's a good question. Could I ask our city attorney to respond to that?
Oh, this microphone is working. Wonderful. Keith Pritzker, Deputy City Attorney. The question posed had to do with whether a case is filed as a felony or as a misdemeanor.
Well, no, it's that the LAPD give you guys the case, or they give it to the DA based on their decision, and I feel like it should be given to the DA to decide, okay, I don't want this, I'm going to send this to the CA, rather than the LAPD making that decision for the DA and then absolving the DA of passing the buck.
Right, I understand your question. Let me start by saying that I've been with the City Attorney's Office for 30 years. I spent the first 7.5 years in the criminal branch. I've filed many hundreds of cases myself, and I've also worked with the DA's office when decisions were made in certain cases as to whether they should be filed as felonies or as misdemeanors. As I'm sure is apparent to everyone here, we need investigators, we need people to bring the cases to us, even though the police department may make, and really needs to make, an initial determination on whether any investigation should be brought to the district attorney for possible felony filing or to the city attorney. It doesn't mean that the independent analysis by district attorneys and city attorneys won't cause that case to be sent to the other agency. One of the biggest roles the city attorney has is in determining which cases to file and which cases not to file. And that's something that we take very seriously. I think it's inappropriate for some of the people in this audience to assume that this case was not taken seriously by the city attorney's office. We have filing guidelines that we go by, and we look to see whether we can prove the elements of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt, which is, of course, the standard for conviction in a criminal matter. So I really believe that even though the police department may make an initial call, it doesn't mean that a case brought to the DA or brought to the city attorney will be overlooked by the other agency, because we do consider whether a case is being either underfiled or overfiled, and of course, and sometimes whether it should be filed at all.
Sorry, and thank you for letting me speak. I really appreciate this. But I feel like there's a statistic that's missing. So we don't know how many cases are not being looked at, or we don't know that the DA decided that this was like the LAPD is basically making the decision, and then there's no statistic recorded that the DA doesn't want this case, or that the CA doesn't want this case. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that statistic gets lost when the LAPD makes the decision of who to send it to. Like there should be some kind of a body that, I mean, maybe it's a joint body between the CA and the DA that looks at it, rather than the LAPD making the recommendation. And I really appreciate the LAPD and all their work that they do, but I just think that, especially in my case, like, you know, what's the definition of serious injury? Well, I feel like I was seriously injured. The detective because I didn't break any bones, the detective felt that I wasn't seriously injured, so she didn't bother to send it to the DA. And so those ambiguous definitions in the law allow these kind of crimes to not get...
I understand your point, and let me just say this, really in support of what you're saying. The LAPD or any policing group, when there's a situation, they do the best they can to say what it was. And whatever they say in that becomes either a felony or a misdemeanor. I think what we really look for here in our city is going forward under the new leadership of Charlie Beck to understand the rights of the cyclists up front so that every officer, when they fill out these reports in these forms, appreciate another attitude, maybe, than what their cultural setup had done for them before. Like, for instance, some people have said to me, some officers ask me for my license for the bicycle, or they make an issue of it. That's old days. That has to get down to the boots, to the guys on the street. And I have a feeling that what you're going to see from Chief Patinger here, as well as from Chief Beck, is a more defined clarity of what a hit and run is, what an incident is, and what kind of a label do they put on it. And obviously, does the DA or the city attorney deal with it?
I mean, strike one has already happened under Chief Beck's watch. It was January 6th. That's right. He had 6 months of being our chief. So when is the next strike going to happen?
I think that's what you heard of his conversation with the city attorney, my conversation with the city attorney. That incident happened January 6th, if I'm not mistaken. He hasn't been chief for 6 months. Bratton left around Christmas time.
Oh, sorry, I thought he left in the summer.
100 days, no.
100 days? Okay.
Yeah. But let's be hopeful that the definition of a situation gets the kind of clarity that obviously you feel, and I obviously feel too, hasn't been done in the past. Okay? Thank you for that. Sir. Your name again for the record.
My name's Patrick Miller. Chief, I don't think that it's fair for anyone to assume that you're not applying the law equally to drivers of motor vehicles and to people on bicycles. The problem is that the law those are different classes of transportation, and they're affected differently. To break a bone in a car accident means it has to be a pretty bad car accident. So that's a metric that's made for being enclosed inside a motor vehicle, and that's different than the kind of metric that a cyclist, a scooter rider, or a motorcyclist needs, or a pedestrian. And so I know that we can't change state law here, but to the degree that the city council maybe could make some directives to change the way that law is applied, because the city attorney and the police department, to an extent, they're just going by the letter of the law, and maybe there's a way for you guys on your own to be more robust to take more offense. Do you take more offense when a grandma is hit over the head and her purse is stolen than a teenage boy has his bike stolen? I mean, I don't know how that works, but I don't know what the how much discretion you're allowed to have there. But I think it's a lot more offensive to leave somebody for dead in the road than it is to scratch somebody's Mercedes and then they have comprehensive insurance and they have to pay a $250 deductible. No blood, no foul. So we are bleeding. We're getting knocked down, and I know personally a lot of cyclists that have been victims of hit and runs that have missed a week of work, that have had months and months of therapy, never broke a bone. And a lot of those people, like I said earlier, they never see the license plate, they never see the face, and so a lot of these things never can be prosecuted. So the ones that can, we really need help from you guys, because all the other laws have gone up. The law for not having a license, the law for not having insurance, the law for not having registration, the law for being drunk. All these things have progressively gotten worse, or become higher prosecutions or higher penalties. And so, in effect, people have more and more of a motivation to leave the scene of a crime.
Thank you very much for what you said, sir. Chief?
Just to respond to that point, quite frankly, I think you're right. And hopefully, as a part of the working group with Commander Doan involved as we move forward, perhaps that's one of the things in terms of some ideas in terms of how we create a new architecture with the legislation. We bring this thing, these ideas to the forefront, and perhaps a change in legislation will occur.
Thank you. Please, again, your name for the record.
Amanda Lipsey. I wanted to back up and ask you a question about the roll call, or not roll call training, but the training that you do for the LAPD. There was an incident on December 25th with LA Critical Mass where a squad car with 2 officers in it decided to attempt to break up the mass sort of ad hoc. They didn't turn on their lights. They didn't identify themselves. They didn't say stop. They didn't say anything. They just jumped out of their car and started pulling people off bikes. And that's dangerous to the bicyclist. And it's also, it's kind of scary, very militant to be riding your bike along the street and just have a police officer grab you off your bike. It's sort of the equivalent of someone doing a pit maneuver for no reason. So I'm wondering what you do to teach them how to address cyclists when they want cyclists to stop. If a police officer tells me, gets behind me with their lights and says on the speaker, stop, I'm going to stop. I'm a law-abiding citizen. So I'm wondering what you're doing to train them to deal with that kind of situation.
Appreciate the question. Actually, that's one of the areas that I reviewed a week ago as a part of the not special order, but the operations order that I will sign after the review of the working group. Stopping a bicyclist or separating them or engaging them is no different than we would a motor vehicle in terms of pulling up and not necessarily blasting the siren, but sometimes just a honk on the horn so as not to startle anybody. I mean, that's not good either. Some of this falls under the umbrella, quite frankly, of that thing called common sense. And the more we give our personnel in terms of how we deal with cyclists in these situations in terms of getting them stopped and pulled over as we do with motors, I think it's just going to be better for everybody involved. So that's one of the areas that we're exploring now that I reviewed, I want to say a week ago, as a part of this new operations order.
Are you giving them steps as far as at what point they can begin to take more of an evasive action? Because it seemed to me that these officers immediately went to an evasive action instead of doing like what you do with a car chase, or if someone doesn't pull over when you try and stop them for a violation, is that you follow them for a little while and get their attention. What these officers had done was block the street and just jumped out and started grabbing people, which seems very evasive and very aggressive for so small infractions. First of all, the cyclists on the street, there were no cars on the street, and we were all going, most of us, I will say, there were some people who were going across the line, but most of us were going the correct way on the street. And if they had chosen to pull someone over for not having a light on their bike, that is a more aggressive response than you would need for such a small infraction. So are you giving them steps to follow as far as first you have to do this, then you have to do this? When they do not respond, this is when you can start to...
Very good point. Our posture for dealing with those kinds of situations involving cyclists is really no different than it is normally when we are engaging a motorist in a similar situation. First of all, it's a willing compliance by coming up behind, and I'm talking about the motorists, honking the horn, blast on the siren, and sometimes even over the PA system, assuming that sometimes they don't see or they're not paying attention, trying to get their attention in reasonable ways. It does not change as it relates to trying to get a motorist, a cyclist's attention in a similar circumstance. All of that will be a part of the review and the training.
Okay. Well, I think we all understand that that's the policy. I just think we need to make sure that the officers actually know that, because that's
once again, as said Chief Beck, as I say now, as we move forward, our commitment to you is to do better.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, any colleagues want to make a comment? Did you want to speak again? One more thing. Yeah, sure. Come on up.
Chief Basinger, you just touched on this a little bit ago, saying that we may need to revise the law regarding hit and run. And I wanted to ask the council members for your support in changing the laws regarding hit and run, and possibly requesting that the city attorney help us draft a law in cooperation with cyclists that we could take to the state legislature to change this. And what this law needs to do is, first, in the event of a hit and run, the driver should automatically lose his driver's license. Revoked, not suspended, but lose his driver's license, period. Because one of the greatest responsibilities any driver has is to remain at the scene of an accident. If they cannot do that, they should not be behind the wheel. Secondly, upon conviction, the car should be seized, because the car has been used to commit a crime. You can lose your car for, trolling for prostitutes. in it. You can lose your car for drunk driving. You should lose your car automatically if it's used to commit a crime by leaving the scene of an accident.
I appreciate your thoughts. Get us that, and I'm more than happy to make a motion to investigate the idea of tightening up the law, making the law clearer, run it by our city attorneys, and go forward. Do I have a second for that motion? Mr. Koretz has seconded that motion, and we'll take it to the next level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, comments, or Mr. Parks wants to make some clarification on action?
I would just like to know, Mr. Rosendahl, where are we headed? Is this coming to council, and in what form? Because one of the things, and I've just jotted down a handful, many of the things that have been brought up today, I think, can be clarified by the fact of, I think, people's unawareness of the police procedures or what the law is, and also maybe some of the training, and particularly the jurisdiction between the city attorney and the district attorney. What I would think would be helpful for us, if this is going to council, is the prospects of getting a written report from the police department that would lay out this material. As we move on and other people, there will be a document that as memories fade, that we can go back to. But to have these conversations going on and on, this is my third or fourth one, that in fact, we had one in the Valley, and we've been in committee several times, without some ability to reference something. And I think all the thing that Chief Paysinger said that they're doing would be important to lay it out as to their roadmap for the future, would give a lot of people the ability to reference something. It'd be a public document. And we certainly, when these issues come back and you want updates, would have a reference point to say, how are we doing on these four things that you implemented? Because right now, I think most of us would have difficulty capturing all the conversation and be able to go back and say, where are we on point A or B? So I would recommend that if this is coming to council, that at some point we memorialize it in a document. I think the issue, and it's clear that there's still some anger about the IED investigation. I don't think it will ever get resolved because it's already come to a conclusion, but I think it's important to tell the public what are the standards you use to come to the conclusions that you did without violating somebody's private rights. But until that is done, I think it's one of those things that we can keep talking about it, but it's an issue that probably needs to be crystallized, and that we then get in the mode of follow-up versus starting from scratch each time we start the meeting.
Maria, can we do that? Take this motion. Mr. Koretz wants to comment first.
Well, on the same idea, maybe we could ask for the chief to come back with a written plan as to how you're going to address all these issues, and maybe come back to committee, and then move from there. So then we actually have something in writing rather than just a conversation that we have from time to time when this issue pops up.
I think both ideas have merit, but I would also add that we defer and default some of this conversation back to that bicycle working group to make certain that as we move forward, we represent, we represent in a coherent way where we are going based upon the council, based upon the advice of that working group, because quite frankly, that's the reason that we convened it.
I totally agree, and colleagues, since both of you really have strengthened a motion here to take action, do we feel that your committee can get this accomplished within 30 days, get it to the public as well, so that before it goes to council, or we take it back to committee, is probably what we should do? What is your preference on this?
It'd probably take a bit more than 30 days.
2 months?
Probably.
45 days?
60 days.
60 days?
I think at least that. Okay. The one thing I want to make clear is there's an amount of material that only the police department knows that they can provide. And then I think the working group certainly is available to talk about what's for the future. But I think you guys have to set the template as to what your perception about what's happened in these incidents and what your perception is how they were handled. And that's the basis that gets started. Now, people may not agree with it, but at least we get it in writing to say where we are.
Understood. I've not been to the working group meetings, but I think some of that has already been explored.
I know
so I think we can move.
I think the dilemma we have, the 15 council members, would be oblivious to all that.
No, understood. I said, because we've already discussed it, I think it'd be quicker putting it down to piece of paper. Okay.
Yeah, and I specifically want to make sure that Matt Simmons' comments that we hear are part of the investigation, part of the working group's thing, so that the next time we have this, he's able to feel that justice has been done on this issue. Did you want to make something? Yeah. Please just to the mic and introduce again for the record.
This is Arisha from LA County Bicycle Coalition, and as one of the people part of the working group, I actually do want to honor Kretz and Park's request to have an update, a regular update given by LAPD, because there's only a certain amount of people, and this is a public forum that's on record, and I think that it's really important that we get commitment and accountability from the chief of police and you and all the people who are, all the LAPD officers working on this. And I think that having it come back to council, maybe on a monthly basis of outlining the steps that you have accomplished and what your next steps are, will help to keep us in the know and keep other people in the know and keep all the council members in the know of what you guys are doing on a monthly basis. I think 60 days, maybe when you may have some actual documents as well, but I think 30 days may be good to give us where you're at, just so that that there's a certain amount of accountability.
Okay, appreciate that. But Maria, if you could frame this for us, what I'd like to do, since he wants the opportunity, since it's the first time the chief and the assistant chief are here, the working group is just forming itself, that to get their act together, frankly, sufficiently enough on what Mr. Parks has said and what Mr. Caress has said. Let's let the first one be 60 days to get all of that data, then we'll go on a monthly basis for status and updates and reports. Maria, can you somehow make that clear enough for...
Well, that would be the recommendation of the committee, and that would go to council so they know what you're doing, and then when the report comes back in 60 days, and I think some of this may need to go through the police commission and the public safety committee as well, but we'll expect a report.
So when will this
60
go
days.
before council? Because I'd like Mr. Parks said, I don't want to turn it into a brand new moment for everybody when in fact we've moved in a certain direction. Go for it.
I think the next opportunity for this to go before council would be next Friday. No?
Exchanging cards.
That would be Friday, March 5th. Friday, March 5th.
Okay. Do we want to do that, colleagues, and bring it to the council at this point, or do we want to do that more research, Mr. Koretz?
I think it would logically make sense to bring a more finished product to the council. So I'd just as soon do that after the 60 days and have something ready for action.
Mr. Park? I agree. I think it just starts it all over again. For those that weren't there, you got to give them something to where at least a starting point.
So do you want to continue it in committee, is what you're saying?
Continue it
for 60 days.
Yes, but then let's get it to the council with some real meat on it and some analysis done. Yes, so that they have something to work from when they get up and speak. Is that comfortable for you, Chief? Okay. All right, so that is a motion, and it's unanimous by the committee to take that action. I want to thank my colleagues for that. I want to thank you, Chief. We're going to go back to the regular agenda, and thank Chief Beck for coming here, and most importantly, for appointing Commander Dome, who is now responsible for the day-to-day accountability on this issue. And for those cyclists who are going to speak on item 2, we have that here. But I just want to thank you all for coming. I apologize that it wasn't at 2 o'clock, but that was beyond my control, but I wanted to use this room so that the cameras outside of here could see it and people could appreciate the real seriousness of the issues we're dealing. Thank you, Chief, for being here. Okay, so now we have moved item 4, and we do have item 2, and I have a series of cards on item 2, and could we please read what item 2 is?
Item 2 is the Board of Transportation Commissioners' report and ordinance relative to a speed limit revision for Riverside Drive between Clybourne Avenue and Van Nuys Boulevard.
Okay, we have John Hishrish for this, for Council Member Krikorian's office. We have Jay Goldberg here. We have Stephen Boakes for this as well. and we also have Ted Rogers for this. So if we could start with the council members.
Sure. John Hesrick on behalf of Council Member Paul Krikorian. As you may know, most of this adjustment occurs within our district, our district, 2nd District. We understand the issue very well. As you may know, when Council Member Krikorian was in the Assembly, he carried a bill to try to bring local control of speed limits back to the local government. Thus far, it's not been successful there, but we became very conversant with the issue. We understand that in order to get enforcement along this strip, which the community has been asking for, and use radar or laser, as we were corrected the other day, we do need to have the traffic survey completed. We've met with the community, we've met with the Department of Transportation, and with the enforcement officers. We are comfortable with the idea that in order to achieve enforcement that this will have to occur, but we are very adamant that we will be working very closely with the DOT to see if traffic calming measures can be introduced along there. We've discussed it with them. In the survey that was done, one of the things that is required is that issues that may not be apparent to the motorist be taken into consideration in adjusting the speed limits. We want to be sure that the fact that this is many Orthodox Jewish community members there who in dark clothing be pedestrians in the evening, we want to be sure that's taken into account. Special events at Notre Dame High School and other factors that may not be apparent. We want to be sure that those concerns are in this recommendation from the Department of Transportation, in addition to other traffic calming measures. So we will be having some meetings with them. We've talked with the department as well as with LA Police Department about enforcement. We just want to make sure that all those things are taken into consideration when this goes forward. It's an important issue and we'll watch it closely. Thank you.
Okay, and we appreciate your comments, but obviously Mr. Koretz, Mr. Labange, and Mr. Krikorian are the three involved in this issue.
Correct, and we certainly are aware of that. We had a meeting the other day at Mr. Labange's office, and his staff is here, and Mr. Koretz's staff, I think, was represented there. So we are, aware of them as well, and work with them on
Do you
all
want
of
us to
this.
leave this in committee until it's worked at, or do we move it forward for action?
Well, I think we want to get enforcement, so I think that, as far as the council member is concerned, it can go forward, but we will be working closely with them to make sure that it comes to fruition in a way that really serves the community.
Okay, great. I'm glad you're going to stay eyes on that. Mr. Koretz, did you want to comment before our speakers come up? We have Jay Goldberg. Come on up if you're here. Jay here, great. And we have Stephen in the back. And we also have Ted Rogers for this.
Yeah, I have to say, I'll be interested to hear what people have to say, because this is kind of a no-win issue, because no matter what we decide, I think it's probably, in a way, the wrong thing. We're forced to get enforcement to look at increasing speed limits from 35 to 40. The idea behind it, in addition to the fact that we have to legally to get enforcement, is that people are already driving at that speed and it sort of matches the speed. I don't necessarily buy it. I think that people tend to have a comfort level in terms of how fast they're willing to go beyond the speed limit. So if it's 35, someone who's a habitual speeder may go 45 or 50 because that's what they feel is the safe level to go above the speed limit. You increase it to 40, I think a certain number of people will adjust their speeding upward. And as was said, it is a somewhat dangerous area in that particularly you have a lot of folks walking to and from shul some evenings in dressed often in completely black outfits, and we're making it easier in some ways to have those folks picked off. In other ways, with better enforcement, we may keep more of a handle on it. So it's a tough issue, and a lot of folks in the community, knowing all that, still are not happy about increasing it to 40.
Sir.
Jay Goldberg, I chair the Public Safety Committee of the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council. I spoke before you on January 27th. I provided you with some information at that time. I brought some more that I've just received, faxed correspondence and hand-delivered correspondence for you to review on this issue. Our position has not changed. We still are concerned that raising the speed limit is hazardous and not a good idea. Our specific area is from Clybourne west to Vineland, and we believe that the Department of Transportation is now in agreement that because of the nature of that area, it's kind of self-mitigating, and there's natural inhibitors, traffic lights that are well placed that will slow the speed of traffic throughout the day as well as during the more dense times. And we would be much appreciative of that area. We're left alone. The Homeowners Association, the Neighborhood Council, and the Chamber of Commerce are all in agreement on this issue. We're consistent in our position that we stated last.
I hope DOT can comment on that when they get up and speak. I appreciate that.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, the Councilman Labange, I believe, was in agreement with that and wanted to change the recommendation in the department's report to change it from Riverside Drive between Vineland Avenue and Van Nuys Boulevard to take out that portion which LAPD believes does not have a speeding problem. So I think we're okay with doing that.
In fact, what Mr. Labange has said to me is that would like to remove the portion of Riverside east of Vineland. Does that solve your issues? Yes, and he did listen to you, and that will be part of our recommendation. Okay, thank you very much for that. Stephen?
Hello, Stephen Box. I live in Hollywood. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about speed limits again, and I am always told it's the law, and it is, if indeed we want to use radar. But of course, the other option is not to use radar and to use other methods for controlling traffic. One thing we could do is stop engineering our streets so that these frontage roads become cut-through alternatives. So Chandler, Riverside, some of these streets along the Expo line, we're taking those frontage streets through a nice quiet neighborhood and turning them into freeway alternatives. Then we wonder why people are driving fast. So we could stop synchronizing lights. We could prevent cut-throughs. I can't think of anybody that raises their hand and says, please, more cut-through traffic through my neighborhood. Please, may I have some more? And that's what we're doing. We're looking at every street as an alternative to the other congested street, so that there's literally no street that's safe. And eventually, and keep in mind, we only do less than 10% of the streets in the city of Los Angeles are eligible for radar enforcement. So to say that we're bound to do it is just simply not true. I think we could explore other alternatives. It's a shame that we're not. So I will continue to show up, and I know you're keeping track of how many times we have this conversation, but I'll be here every time there's a speed limit increase on the agenda.
We'll be here.
Excellent. I'll look forward to seeing you again.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Please, I know, we'll take your cut. But Ted, you coming up too? Come on up.
This is Dennis Hyman.
Say your name for a record.
Dennis Hyman. You're actually talking about my neighborhood here. And Riverside Drive is very popular with bicyclists.
Yes.
And as you increase, you're actually dictating the speed of the street by how many drivers are driving at the speed. Well, you're allowing the drivers to have the control. The city should be controlling this. You can utilize red lights more frequently. They do that next to the orange line for the bike path. They don't allow the drivers to dictate. That's for the security of the bus in relationship to the cars. Well, now you're allowing the speed to go up by how many drivers are in a certain area. Well, you can try to slow that down by the red lights, but when the speed does go up, the frequency and severity of the accidents for the pedestrians and the cyclists goes up. And it's a very popular street, mainly because of Griffith Park. They use that as a pathway, and you're going along what the motorists are dictating to.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that comment. Did you want to speak, Ted Rogers? Or forever hold your peace?
Forgive me, too many conversations today. Ted Rogers, bikingnla.com. One day I'll learn to say that fast. The way the law is right now is an incredibly bad law. Allowing speeding drivers to set speed limits is akin to allowing bank robbers to determine whether banks should be locked at night. We've got to stop turning our city streets into freeways. Statistics have shown that there's a 50% survivability rate for traffic accidents below 30 miles per hour when a car hits a pedestrian or a bike. As the speed limit goes up, survivability goes down. So what you're doing is giving people license to kill. We've got to stop this. It's a very bad law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, too, for your comments. And so the recommendation, unless somebody wants to disagree with this, is support the direction of Koretz, Labange, and Krikorian, who've been in their meetings. But Mr. Koretz.
Well, I think actually my staff has been in those meetings, and they've strongly recommended that we go in the 40-mile-per-hour direction. And I may be reluctantly in agreement, but the question is, a lot of that's based on the testimony that we've gotten that speeds are not based on the speed limit signs that are present. It's based on the driving conditions. And so, in theory, if we move it from 35 to 40, it shouldn't have a negative impact in terms of what people are actually driving. It merely matches it. And I don't know technically what we need to do to monitor whether that's really true or not. But I would say, along with approving this, we should have some sort of base speed set with whatever it takes technically to make that happen, and then revisit it in an appropriate period of time, say 3 to 6 months, and see if it really has not had the impact as people in the know technically have told us. In other words, the speeds should be the same if the advice that we've gotten is correct. If it isn't and the speeds go up as a result, I'd want to be able to revisit this and make a correction.
Is that the general feeling, first of all, of Mr. Labange's office and Mr. Krikorian's office? Just so that we have the three council members in sync here.
On behalf of Mr. Krikorian, I think that, monitoring the performance as a result of this would be very key, an important thing to do, because we've been assured by DOT that, that when you do this, things don't go up. But I think that's a very good suggestion that we find a way to revisit the issue and see if, in fact, traffic has crept up as a result of this. So I think we should be supportive of that.
I think it would be important if we could, the LAPD officer that was at the last meeting, I think had a very good presentation, and maybe you can come and clarify some of these issues, because I don't think you can take these things in isolation, because even if you evaluate this down the road and want to bring it back, what you're losing is their enforcement. So you have a choice of having a speed limit that you can't enforce, and he'll tell you why they choose radar versus other enforcement for their safety, and you have a speed limit you can't enforce versus having a speed limit you can. And if you follow the kind of history of these, is that it was based on the fact that people create speed traps that know that you can't drive that slow and then stand there and write you a ticket. And so why don't you give us the overview you gave us last time and what some of these particulars that you'd have to deal with.
Well, it was my colleague, Officer Williams, that was in there.
Your name for the record, too,
Oh,
sir.
yes. Officer Chad Dellinger, Valley Traffic. Troy Williams was at that meeting. I did speak with him briefly on that subject. But as far as enforcement with the LAPD and motor officers, it is obviously more safe and more effective with laser and radar. When a speed limit is established through a traffic survey, it's basically then justified as a safe suggested speed, which then when we go to the court, it's extra for us to say this is why this speed is unsafe. And with raising it from 35 to 40, it's not going to have that much of an impact. We've seen it on other parts in the valley that have been raised already. People drive what they're comfortable with, and if speeds go up, they're generally still going to be on that same speed that they were traveling before. As far as our enforcement goes, it's still, if 50 is unsafe in a 35, 50 is still unsafe in a 40 just because it goes up the area. The conditions are still there. It's going to depend on, as he had stated earlier, the conditions of the road, as when we do enforcement, when we don't do enforcement. But as far as more effective enforcement, safe enforcement, we really need the laser and the radar to be able to do that effectively.
What are your options without the laser?
The only option that we have without a laser is going to be estimation, and it's going to be a pace.
Okay. Explain what the pace is.
Certainly. If you're pacing a vehicle, what you're going to do is get right directly behind that vehicle. You're going to basically match the speed of that vehicle.
and then you're going to look down at your speedometer to see what the actual speed is. Our speedometers are calibrated every 6 months, so we know what it actually is saying when we look at it. If we're following a vehicle at 60 miles per hour down a street, that's not going to be safe. If we're sitting in a location that is basically in the valley, what we go off of mainly for enforcement would be what we call the top 10, top 20 streets, the streets that have the most accidents, and that's where we look for. Riverside falls off and on that quite often. If we're at that location and that street has been surveyed, vehicles coming towards us at 60, we can get that reading with the laser or radar device. Basically grab the driver's attention by activating lights, going out briefly into the street so they can be more visible, slow the vehicle down, slow traffic down, get in behind that vehicle, and basically in a matter of 200 to 500 feet make the traffic stop, rather than pacing that vehicle at 60 over several hundred feet down the street with driveways, pedestrians, bicyclists, other things. It's just safer.
Let me ask you, how does the court view your testimony from pacing or estimate versus laser or radar?
It is the court weighs a lot more heavily on laser and radar. We are tested, if you go through the laser or radar class, you're testimated on speed estimation. If you don't go through that, the officers are not tested in speed estimation. What that means is basically the court will look at that officer as not an expert in that field, and that errors can be made. And errors obviously can be made with speed estimation. It's not as accurate as a laser or radar device.
Okay. Thank you. Let me ask you this. You heard the constituents who are the neighborhood association, you heard from the bicyclists. And they basically say if you up it to 40, you're just creating more of a potential accident and injury. As bicyclists are vulnerable to 35 miles, and they're more vulnerable, obviously, to 40. And then if a person's mentally going 40, they might go 42 or 43, like people know 65, but they're closer to 70. I'm just talking about how does this help us?
Well, I respectfully disagree with what they're saying. I don't see vehicles going faster just because the speed limit is up there. It helps us having the survey because we can get more aggressive enforcement, meaning more officers when in a stretch of a street, meaning basically here from Vineland to Van Nuys Boulevard. Basically what the surveys are based off of the 85th percent average speed. That average speed is basically going to be the same whether you raise it or lower it. What you're only really doing by raising the speed limit is matching what that 85th percentile speed is. You're getting closer to it rather than under it.
Okay, appreciate that. And Mr. LaBonge's office, you say LaBonge would like to remove the portion of Riverside east of Vineland. So does that mean you want it to stay at 35? That's what you mean? Yes. Okay. How does that work within the mix if it's 40 and it's 35 on that?
It's going to be okay because posted from 40 to 35 isn't that great of a speed change. So that's not going to be a problem from there. That stretch from Vineland to Clybourne really doesn't have a speed problem as the rest of Riverside does. Mainly there's more crosswalk violations and things like that of vehicles versus the pedestrians trying to cross the street, whereas it's more speed more west of Vineland. So in that area, we agree it doesn't need to be raised up. It probably might be safer in that area to have it at 35 just because of the pedestrians and the businesses that are there. But from Vineland over, the more aggressive enforcement that we view should be a speed type of enforcement. You can get more accurate enforcement. You can get more of it with laser or radar versus, and as it was stated earlier, in the courts, it's a lot better for us to go in there and say, it is surveyed, we have a laser, this is what happened, we tracked it, this is what the laser said, this was our estimation, versus I was sitting there, I think it was 35 and I have nothing to back it up with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Mr. Corretti, do you want to make any more comment?
No, I'm covered.
You're covered. Okay, so the recommendation is to support the direction of Koretz, Labange, and Krikorian? Is that what we're hearing here? Ms. Parks? That's good.
With the amended direction that
90 days.
we have them check in 90 days and see if there's been any kind of significant change.
Where you got that?
Yeah, so we're going to change the recommendation or report to Vineland instead of Clybourne, and then amended resolution, or, ordinance. And then we'll have the 90-day report back.
And when will this go before council? You figure?
March 5th. That will be the first Friday in March. March 5th.
Thank you. So just have one question. What's entailed to us? Is that another survey to be done with the speed higher than to come back in 90 days or whatever?
I'm not sure if you have to do it again. I believe you can just amend it and just take out that portion.
How will you or DOT come back and tell us what your analysis is? Is that
I think DOT needs to respond to that.
Hello, Brian Gallagher, Department of Transportation. Once the City Council approves the change of the speed limit based upon the engineering study, it has to go before the mayor's office. It'll take about 30 to 45 days before we can actually change the signs out on the street. Maybe, after 30 days that the signs are in, we will have to go out and shoot radar at several spots all over again. But this is something that we're committed to in order to try to understand the effects in Los Angeles of changing the speed limit compared to the effects that the federal government saw on a national level. So maybe 30 days after the signs are put up out on the street. Also, as part of this increase in the speed limits, we will be upgrading all of the 25 mile an hour when children are present signs near all the schools. So that's also going to be done.
Okay, well, we're going to clarify. You're not changing the 25, you're just putting the kind of green signs up?
As part of this study, we did find that some schools did not have the 25 mile an hour signs, so we'll be adding those, and then we will also look at the other locations to see if we need to upgrade the existing signs that they have, because the 25 mile an hour speed limit overrides whatever the other posted speed limit is on that street when children are present.
Very good.
Okay, the vote will be 2-1. I'm not going to vote in favor of it, and I don't want to go into the discussion of it any further, but the vote will be 2-1 from committee, with me voting no on that issue. Thank you. Okay. There's one other item, but we're going to continue that item. Is that item number 3?
Item number 5.
Item number 5 will be continued until when? It goes
Next
back
meeting?
to the commission?
Next meeting. Item number 5 is the Board of Transportation Commissioners' report relative to prohibiting the exchange of compensation to gain access to passengers. DOT wanted to do some more outreach with the stakeholders, so they're prepared to come back at the next meeting.
Very good. Appreciate that very much. Before we adjourn, I just want to thank Channel 35. They're in the same budget cuts and all the other issues, everybody else, and for covering this important meeting. Colleagues, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.